We're at a historic tipping point for women. In October 2017, the hashtag #MeToo spread across the globe. What began as a Hollywood sexual assault scandal sparked a public reckoning around the world.
I was asked as to why I'm putting together these conversations about such delicate and incendiary topics. And the truth is, I've been frustrated watching the news and reading the newspaper about the lack of candor and balance in discussing these issues that affect us all.
I've seen signs of kind of panic around sexuality and particularly a tendency to vilify all men.
People are not actually going through any court process.
We are risking a kind of sort of social media lynching.
And one thing I really appreciate about Me Too is that for the first time it's given consequences.
Right.
To men's inappropriate behavior. And listen, as a man, if a man rapes a woman, if a man harasses, they have deserved whatever repercussions come their way. I mean, it's not appropriate to do that. It's not right. It's not fair. It's not.
There was a spiritual gathering I was at once, and the long dreadlocked bongo playing, ooh, dude, he said something so profound. He was talking about how in the way of the humans, men have the money, women have the looks or the sexuality, and that is the lowest common denominator exchange. Men, if you don't have money, you better get some other form of power. Women, if you don't have looks, you better get some other way of being enticing. That's your bargaining chip. And it happens to be like on the gradation scale of unenlightened to enlightened, it happens to be at the very base level.
Absolutely.
So why do powerful men take advantage of their power and have sex? Or
because they can.
Because they can. Mm-hmm. But if so where does it all begin? I think it just harkens back to Neanderthal days. It's a survival strategy. But I think we're having this conversation, and anybody who's watching, you're interested in thriving and having a life that is different and having a life that's on a higher vibrational level. So I think that's why the strategies that you have to share and that I will figure out how to share could be helpful, so that we can not have to get seduced by that. It's there. I think it may always be there.
There's a quote that I always love by Abraham Lincoln. And Lincoln said, "You can usually tell how a man's going to react given adversity. If you want a true test of a man's character, give him power." Now, because
that's good.
Men normally have held the power in this society. That's changing now.
Yeah.
We know how men act out.
Yeah.
At least heterosexual men.
Yeah.
I have seen women in power, and I've seen how they've been twisted by it. It doesn't show up the same way always. It shows up different ways. But human beings are vulnerable to this. It's not a male-female thing.
Absolutely.
And as women come into their influence and their power in this country, they're going to be tested similarly in different ways.
Yeah.
But let me digress just for 1 second here, because we're going to talk, before we can talk to women about their role in changing this, we need to let them know that we get it. And so I want to really speak to the men now that are watching this. And guys, if you haven't got it yet, times are a-changing. And things that you might have been able to do even 2 and 3 years ago are not going to be tolerated anymore. And especially if you're someone in authority, if you're someone who can hire and fire, you're going to have to take a different tack, or the consequences will be significant for you. And I think even men that are middle-aged and up in power, like at Fox News and Fox, what happened there with their senior management team, there's repercussions now that weren't there even a few years ago. So this is a great thing. It really is. It's a great thing. And like all great things, there's another balance to it.
Yes.
And we will get to that balance.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that once men, these are men that need to do the research and do the reading, once men realize the reality that women have lived, and even in this society today, not several hundred years ago, and what they have to go through to survive and not be assaulted and not be harassed, if you're any kind of human being at all, you're going to have a certain amount of compassion for that. And so you're going to be asked to elevate your game and stop harassing women and stop touching women without their consent. That isn't that hard. It's not that complex. If you had to take one thing away, it's do not touch a woman without her consent. And at work, there really isn't ever a reason to do it. I mean, I suppose you can shake hands.
Right.
But after that, I don't see why there's another reason you need to lay hands on a female colleague or a female employee. So men need to get that first. Because if we're going to ask women to step up and take responsibility for their own empowerment, we have to look at men and say, you need to do your part as well. And guys, you're either going to do it or you're going to pay the consequences. And I will say this. If you look at what happened with slavery in this country, there was a time that people owned slaves like property. They owned them like chattel.
Right.
And
they weren't
some
people.
Yeah, and some people said, that's not right. They said, what's the problem? They're not really people, they're slaves.
Right.
They're not humans. I said, well, they look like humans, they have arms and legs. No, they are humans, and they started to have that cognitive dissonance. And of course, slavery was changed by conscious people who gathered together and of course fought a civil war over it, among other things. So at some point, men, if they want to be on the right side of history,
Yes.
are going to have to say, these are not chattels, these are not moms or sisters, these are human beings that have their own, dreams and hopes, and I may not have to agree with them or even support them, but I'm not going to impede them. I'm not going to do things to intentionally stand in their way. I'm certainly not going to harass them. So men need to really get clear on that. And we have the Me Too movement, as frustrating as it's been for many men, it's going to serve them eventually, because something, it takes a lot of energy to harass people and to hold people down and to hold them in disfavor. It takes energy, and when you stop doing that, you're going to have so much more to harvest to bring some more value into your lives.
Oh,
All right.
I feel like I feel like the solution when there's a problem, my way is to want to understand all the people and all the places. And as a dream expert, I always tell people, if there's a nightmare, recognize potentially that everyone and everything in your nightmare or in your dream is an aspect of you. So I think about, to me, what's the most despicable thing that's happening. It's what you were just talking about. It's men treating women like they're not people. They're taking what they want from them. And I think, okay, this is part of my dream. This is part of my reality. Where have I done that? And I just remembered how for a moment in time, I'm so not proud of this. I'm so horribly embarrassed by this. I was in junior high school, 8th grade. And I thought it was cool to take the lunch from the 6th graders. And a friend of mine and I would be like, you don't need that pizza. Nope, we'll take it. And we literally had no thought that this kid isn't having their lunch. What if they were frigging hungry? Like, what if that was their only meal that day? Some of the kids, I took it and I didn't think about how scared that might have made them, how scared they were of me, and I'm haunted by it when I think about how it's horrible. But I didn't see the kids that I took, and it was, how many pizzas did I take? I don't know, but it was for a period of time that we thought it was a fun game. It was because we didn't think of them as people. They just had something that we wanted. Ooh, good pizza. I want the pizza. I'm going to take it. I should have that because I want it. So I have that in me. I have that same thing that I find so despicable in me. And to me, it's swallowing the bitter pill.
It lives within all of us.
It's horrible to recognize that I treated somebody inhumanely, and yet it takes me out of victimhood. It puts me into perpetrator mode, which is worse than victimhood. It's a lot easier. In some way, you get more kudos, you get more support if you're the victim. When you're a perpetrator, ooh.
A lot less sympathetic.
Ooh, so I just want to recognize that I know there's a little bit of that in all of us. And I feel like part of my role in this is to look for solutions for how women or men who have been on the receiving end of this kind of this imbalance of power, how we can get ourselves out of victimhood as quickly as possible so we can begin to pave our way into feeling more empowered. And one way is to recognize that icky stuff is here too.
Sure. Well, let me tell you my wake-up call, because yours was pizza, picking on younger kids.
Pizza.
I am blessed that many of the women that I dated
painful.
before I got married and I are still very close. They love my wife, they love me, and I love them. And as part of my research, I called them up. And I said, listen, when we dated, was there ever anything that I did that you felt you were compelled to do even though you didn't want to do it? And all of them said, absolutely. And we talked about it, and it was always around sex, because I had a huge appetite, and I wanted it more than they did. And in relationship, they did it out of love, and they wanted to do it to please me, and there was things I did to please them as well. But that was around, like, whoa! And then, because I asked my wife if that's an experience that she's had, she goes, absolutely. And I realized, my God, look who I'm showing up in my life. Look who I'm hurting the people that I love the most. Not that I wasn't raping them. I was simply enforcing, putting pressure to get what I wanted. Now, there's a dynamic in marriage and relationship that is different than if you meet someone on the street or if you're having an interview. But still, that was a wake-up call for me. And I'm having to change the way I show up in my marriage, and because that's real. And so that was...
That's an enlightened moment.
Well, it was a shameful moment that I had to swallow and breathe in.
But if you don't swallow that bitter pill, if you don't recognize that you've got some part in the equation, then by definition you're going to be blaming, and then things keep remaining the same. Sure. The not so merry-go-round keeps getting more dismal, and it doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that by taking some responsibility you're completely letting everybody else off the hook, but you can't do anything about them. I mean, I think this is where a little bit of quantum physics shows up, where if we do one thing, the butterfly effect, if we change one little thing inside of ourselves, physics backs up that there is a change.